The Dixie Fire has now spread to many, many acres in California, over 430,000 acres, making it the third largest wildfire in California history. Guys, after years of covering wildfires and wildfire season, every year it seems there's a new historically large wildfire. The impacts and the danger that these wildfires create, and the size and the scope of them just keeps increasing, right? Body counts rising. Paradise, people were burned alive. The Dixie Fire has already burned down homes. People had to flee from their houses. Let's look a bit here. Driven by fierce winds and bone dry conditions. So this is like basically firefighters' worst nightmare. What's going on with the Dixie Fire? The Dixie Fire exploded to 432,000 acres in Northern California, having grown more than 100,000 acres in the last 24 hours. The blaze is now the third largest wildfire in California history and the largest to burn in the U.S. this year, surpassing the massive bootleg fire. It started on July 13th, so this has been going for weeks. Guys, one of the things that people don't understand, some of these wildfires, like the scope on their how long they're going to be burning and how long it takes to contain them is often months. So especially when they get deep into a national forest and they just keep burning. We have so many dead trees. It's just dry kindling. But look at this. The huge blaze that leveled a gold rush town is now burning in 4 counties, Butte, Lassen, Plumas, and Tehama, and remains 35% contained. Officials say a perfect storm of conditions has driven the fire's rapid spread. The blaze was 6th on California's list of largest wildfires just Thursday. So, that was for the stats yesterday. And basically, this is a constant threat in the state of California. We are constantly throughout this dry part of the year under threat for wildfires. But then climate change has exacerbated many of the factors that make these things worse. The drought, dry, vegetation, and then specifically also with Santa Ana winds, hot, windy conditions. No humidity, nothing to help. Some of the wildfires a few weeks ago or a few months ago got aided through humidity, through fog banks, through, I don't know if there was any rain that helped any of them out. But you can just see some of the destruction. They heard this is in the LA Times, being wrought, in, let's see, this Northern California town that the Dixie Fire has destroyed. I mean, just look at this. It is, it's downright apocalyptic. The town, which dates to California's gold rush era, has some buildings more than a century old. Not anymore. Many of those buildings burnt down. One man, I think, was had a business that is a historic building. It burned down. I was reading that earlier. So you can just see, so people are being rushed out of their houses. They're having to evacuate. And these fires are huge. And because so much of California is not, we have a lot of suburban California, but we also have a lot of what is called like the rural urban interface, right? Where you have people living in little townships, but they are right up against forest or just a more rural area, right? They're kind of tucked in the countryside, and they're at risk. I mean, those areas are at risk from wildfire. And then folks who live completely rurally are often, either completely prepared and ready to evacuate, or they also often have defensible space all around their house, and they're more than equipped to, deal with the fires themselves. But the smoke, the issues with the smoke near the Dixie Fire, they're in northern, Northern California, trying to see, let's see here. There's some more of the story about, what happens is the kind of the sun is blocked out oftentimes by these fires. Everything turns orange or gray, right? This isn't even some of the worst of it. But you can just see that these wildfires are devastating. And as long as we continue to not address climate change, I don't see any way out of wildfires. We just have to build our cities and towns accordingly, and try to do as much resource wild area management, wilderness management as we can. But at the end of the day, if we're not addressing climate change, I don't see any way back from this. I don't see how these don't just keep getting worse. These wildfires are going on all over the world now, as well as multiple areas were flooding last week. We were looking at that. Be safe, everybody. Be careful. Make sure here in California, you got to have a bug out bag. You got to be ready to go at any time if there's a wildfire or any other issue. Like you want equipment and food and water in case there's an earthquake or a power outage, or who knows what have you. You all should have a bug out bag and something ready to go. You know what I mean? Just no matter what happens, no matter where you're living, it's just a good thing to have. What do they always say? It's all those things you wish you'd done, but in the moment you didn't. Keep all your important documents in one place that's easy to get to, and you can leave with it. Make sure blah blah blah. Right? You gotta be prepared for this, because for anything in your area, if it's for us, it's wildfires and earthquakes. For you, whatever part of the country or the world you're in, could be something else. Be prepared. Just think about it. You know what I mean? Take a minute, more than a minute. Think about it. This kind of stuff is really, like I said, the issues of dealing with climate change, I think, are the forefront. Those are the foremost issues. But then we also have, how are these wildfires responded to, right? Recently, the California Governor Newsom was basically begging with the Forest Service to jump in and fight fire sooner. That they basically kind of sat on their hands with the Dixie Fire and let it burn for a little bit. That's what this kind of attitude of just let it burn, gets you. So, listen, Forest Service promises swifter action on new wildfires after plea from California. Hit with bipartisan criticism about a, quote, wait-and-see approach to fighting wildfires in California, the new chief of the USDA Forest Service is directing his agency to become more aggressive about suppressing new fires. Forest Service Chief Randy Moore, who until earlier this year oversaw 18 national forests in California, is implementing the new policy in complaints that the federal agency was too slow to respond to wildfires that began this year on national forest land in the North State. Let's see. This is from Doug LaMalfa. He's a Republican House member. He said Chief Moore committed that he will issue a change of policy of all regions to immediately put out all fires, et cetera, et cetera. This is a major policy change for the U.S. Forest Service, whose previous policy was to let the fire burn if it was not immediately adjacent to communities or major infrastructure. Now communities are burning because they didn't. It wasn't immediately adjacent to. Let's see. There was a quote. Yeah, Governor Newsom, who toured the Tamarack burn zone last week with Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak, complained to President Joe Biden about the Forest Service handling of the fire. On a video call with Biden and other Western growers, Newsom blamed an agency culture that, quote, too often is wait and see for allowing the Tamarack fire to spread. Quote, we need your help to change the culture. I could do my Gavin Newsom impression, I guess. We need your help to change the culture in terms of the suppression strategies in this climate, literally and figuratively, to be more aggressive on these federal fires, Newsom told Biden. Newsom's criticism followed similar complaints about the Tamarack fire by Republican Representative Tom McClintock, who urged Moore to change course and make sure, quote, that all wildfires are suppressed as soon as possible. And then out of control wildfires called negligence. The Plumas County supervisor says, I think it was negligence. As far as the Forest Service letting this much forest burn. So keep in mind, there are lots of different aspects to how these things happen, how they get worse. Simple government bureaucracy, the idea that they don't understand the emergency that the feds don't understand the emergency that the Western complex of wildfires is every year doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Trev Flat 5 in the comments says, let it burn may be okay in January, but Jesus, August, what WTF? Bro, in California, our wildfire season is like starts in January. It's like all year long, basically. Our wildfire season has gotten longer and longer, as time goes on, or as climate change worsens. Center that, remember that all these discussions about climate change and flooding and the polar vortex freezing people and people dying of exposure in the heat wave that was a few weeks ago, the wildfires that are burning people alive, burning villages down or towns down. This is all part of climate change, and this is part of why I argue as a left socialist that we got to have a good amount of green in your your socialism, right? And green meaning eco. Like we need eco socialism as far as that's how we should center. Jobs guarantees, universal programs. That's why I think the Green New Deal is a good place to start. But, being frankly opportunistic about the crisis that we're going to continue to live through with climate change. All of our lives are going to be affected by it. And we could turn the crisis into something to mobilize around, which is often how the left does well, I believe, politically, is when there is some kind of crisis to mobilize around, whether it was the Great Depression and the financial crisis then, or the Gilded Age and the first wave of progressivism in the United States, or even just last year and how activated people were on the left protesting and what have you. What we saw, though not ideal electorally last year, the victory of Biden over Trump.